Hi, I'm Danielle, and I'm so glad that you're here because together we're going to work through big stuff. A few weeks ago, I sat across from my husband in a cafe and I said to him, "You can leave. I won't hate you. I won't fuck you over financially. If you want a different life to what we have now, a life with no responsibility, a life with freedom, a life without constant conflict with teenagers, you want long lunches, you want actual fun, then I will not resent you. These are my kids. This is my circus. And you actually don't have to be here." Now, he laughed awkwardly. And then we both realized that I was deadly serious. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't heightened. I was feeling deeply, deeply pragmatic about the place that our relationship is in right now and the place that our life is in right now. Today, I want to tell you about the night my husband was slightly tipsy and he made a joke that cracked our marriage wide open, and how a conversation about boredom in relationships has taken us to territory that we have never been in the 12 years that we've been together. And hopefully will bring us closer together than ever before when we are just through this shitstorm. So it all started one night when my husband was a little bit tipsy. He'd been out with some friends, and when he came home, there was some banter going on in the kitchen, and he made a crack about how I used to be fun. And I took that very personally because what I heard in that moment is I used to be fun because I used to drink, and now that I don't drink, I am no longer fun. And I think the reason that that stung so much is because I wonder if it's true, right? I wonder if now that I don't do those things that I have found to be fun for pretty much my entire adult life, even my teenage life, now that I don't do those things, have I actually become boring? And I am having to redefine what I do for fun and what I think is fun. And it has definitely changed what we do together as a couple. So I am a bit sensitive to that comment. There's no doubt about it. And my initial response was incredibly defensive and a little bit like harsh whispery, like, you can just, but I sat on it for a little bit of time and I thought, well, maybe he actually doesn't think that I'm fun anymore and he deserves to be with somebody. We both deserve to be with somebody. Everybody deserves to be with somebody who they enjoy being with, who they find fun. So I slept on it and I invited Nick for a coffee the next day to have a talk about it. And I really decided to remove the emotion from the idea of what we traditionally believe a marriage is. It's like till death do us part, unless it's really bad and you have to leave. Like, don't you just have to endure for the rest of your life and you just get really comfy and that's kind of the way that it is? And a marriage can become like a status quo. Any relationship can become like just this status quo, almost like a habit. We just exist. And I decided to look at it in a slightly different way. Now, the things that sort of informed how I was looking at it were it was a book that I had read recently and a conversation that I had recently, which made me look at the institution of marriage or long-term relationships in a slightly different light. So I recently was talking to a girlfriend and we were just having a catch up and she was kind of reeling about a relationship in her life, like some friends of hers who had been together for 30 years. And the husband kind of out of the blue said, "I love you. We've had a good life, but I don't want to be married to you anymore. I want to see what my next chapter can look like. And I was quite surprised to find myself not horrified by that. I was like, yeah, that's fair. And where I'm coming from with that is my mum died recently. So I'm really in this space of understanding how precious our one big, bold life is and that time is really finite. And I said to my friend, I'm not horrified that he was able to recognize that their time was kind of through and he's ready to go and live the rest of his big, bold life. Like 30 years is a really long time to be with someone. I wonder what could come next for him. And it's not about going out and getting it on with loads of really young people and living your 20s again. I mean, unless it is, that's completely fine if that's what people want. I think it's about sort of the next stage of your evolution and your self-discovery outside of this partnership, which, you've been in for such a long time. So there was that conversation, but I have also recently read a book called Less. I can't remember who it is by, but it is a delightful story about a middle-aged man who's like really sort of trying to find himself. And in the book, he has some friends who are his pedestal couple. This couple he sees as a perfect marriage, a perfect relationship, and they're a long-term gay relationship that he uses as his benchmark for what good love is. And one of the men in the couple said to him, we've decided to split after 20 years. We are dissolving our marriage. And he was like, no, you can't do that. You're my benchmark couple. And he was like, hey, it's okay. It's okay. This is an agreement that we made. And he went on to say when he proposed to his partner was like, I'm having a really good time with you. So I'm going to say yes. Yeah, I will marry you. I'll give you 10 years. And then when the decade was up, they went for dinner at the same restaurant that they proposed at. And they had a reassessment of their relationship and the agreement. And the partner said, I'm still having a really good time. I'm still really in this. I feel like there is more to be done here. I'll give you another 10 years. And then at the 20-year mark, they came back and had dinner. And he said, it has been an awesome 20 years and I'm ready for my next chapter now. And I thought, that's actually really amazing. When we get together with somebody, we are often a version of ourselves that evolves many, many times over the years. And it's okay if you evolve in completely different directions. Right now, like Nick and I are so different from who we were when we first got together, and we've had multiple careers and we've had financial wins and financial losses, and we've had, different sort of friends and people come into our lives. We've had so many different experiences that we have sort of both grown from. And in some of those ways we've grown together, and in some of those ways we have sort of grown apart, but maybe parallel. He hasn't had some of the same growth as I've had, and I haven't had some of the same growth as he's had. And throw in the mundanity, basically. Throw in the mundanity of day-to-day life, and things can become a little bit habitual. So after these two sort of concepts or conversations that happened fairly close together, I was really looking at long-term relationships through a slightly different lens of maybe once you strip away all of the narrative of till death do us part and we're supposed to love each other forever and we're here as a team and we always got to work it out, maybe it's okay to say, far out, this is actually not what I want anymore. And it's not cutting and running because it's too hard or too challenging, or it's about, more mindfully deciding together if this is still where you want to be. So I feel like the conversation is less about, staying or leaving or loving each other or still in love versus loving each other. Like, it's less about all of that and more about, do you still consciously choose to be in this because it is work? Long-term relationships, all relationships are work. You need to constantly tend to it like a garden so that it doesn't become overgrown or doesn't become barren or all of those things. Like, it needs this sort of constant tending, I think is the nicest way to think about it, because it's really, really easy to take your eye off the relationship and it becomes straggly. It can become straggly. And this stage of life that we're at is particularly challenging, when we're looking at, this sort of the sandwich generation that we have been, ourselves in the last 18 months or whatever. We've had a lot of sort of stuff going on, obviously, with my mum, and then we've got teens, we've got like a blended family. So there's another parent in the mix. There is a number of challenges that have been coming from every side, his own business, my own business. We have become a very good partnership at running a household, but it's more than that. A marriage for me needs to be more than that. A relationship needs to be more than someone who can run a household well with me. So we had this conversation, which definitely took him by surprise. I think when I invited him to go for coffee after his comments the night before, he was expecting me to probably, give him a piece of my mind, tell him, that it was unacceptable, that he'd hurt my feelings or, whatever. I don't think that he was expecting me to give him a get out of jail free card. So it really changed the direction of the conversation pretty quickly. And he did actually ask me to give him a bit of time to think about it and not to think about, whether he wanted to be here or not, but give him some time to think about and digest all the things that I had said so that he could come back with a response fitting of the amount of thought that I had put into the conversation. So when we talked about it again afterwards, it really did become less about, the nuts and bolts of, staying versus leaving, but it's about, okay, what do we both need so that we feel like we are still having fun? Firstly, we're not bored, we're not boring, we're having fun, we're engaged, we're doing different things that is making our relationship still feel fresh. Also, bringing in more, I guess, psychological safety for both of us within the parenting dynamic that we have been struggling with the kids. And it's sort of created like a two-part conversation that is far more mindful than gripping on and white knuckling it for the next however many years, hoping that by the time this stage has passed, there is still enough of a relationship there for us to enjoy the years where there are no kids at home. So what we kind of landed on just as a sort of starting point was more around, we've brought in date night. So we've brought in date night, but date night traditionally is going out for dinner, having a bottle of wine, talking about stuff. And when Nick has suggested that we have regular date night in the past, which he has, I've been really resistant to it. So he said, well, I've suggested that we have a weekly date night, but like you don't seem interested in that? And I said, because I immediately think that date night is going to be going out drinking. You drink, you drink a couple of glasses of wine. I'm not interested in that. And he sort of said, well, you haven't come up with anything as an alternative. So rather than just shutting something down, because of this perceived idea of what you think it's going to be, coming up with another suggestion would be a great way to keep the conversation going. So I had to concede that he was right on that. And what we've decided is, there is a weekly date night, but there is an alternate obligation for organising. So we go week on, week off on who organises it. And it doesn't have to be going out for dinner. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to, be extravagant or, really time consuming. It just needs to be different things that have been thought about by the other person. And so far, we're only a couple of weeks into that. So far on week one, he organised a beautiful sunset picnic at a headland overlooking the entire escarpment and looking back over the sunset, which was really, really beautiful. And the following week, I organised smashing shit in a rage room and then going out for burgers, which I think is really interesting because we've both picked something that we both think that the other would enjoy, and we have both therefore then enjoyed it. Just, as a win, I really enjoyed the rage room, and as did he. And we have he's organising this week, so that's something for us to look forward to every week. Time outside of the family dynamic, outside of the ongoing battle that dinner time has become. And the other thing that we've really implemented is some really consistency is not a strong suit of mine. And I also grew up in a household that was really loosely disciplined, whereas Nick grew up with very, very strong discipline. And so both our parenting styles is something that you'd think we would have worked out over the last 12 years, but we actually haven't. And it is an ongoing conversation that has reached a point now where, there's nobody is feeling particularly safe at my dinner table because it is a tinderbox that is waiting for bad comments, for mocking. There's like all sorts of stuff going on because it hasn't been addressed, I guess, fast enough in the past. Therefore, there are some sort of boundary issues going on. And it's not about anyone being bad, anyone being, a bad kid, a bad parent, a bad whatever. It's simply about the dynamic that is ever shifting within a household because kids are growing and changing all the time. So the dynamic is growing and changing all the time. Dinner time at my household was once a really beautiful, easy, fun thing, and it just sort of has devolved rather than gotten more civilized, which is endlessly interesting to me. But the parenting needs and the boundary needs are ever changing as the boundary pushing of teenagers is ever changing. So we have come together as a partnership and created a new set of guidelines that have been delivered in a family meeting, which are really black and white on, the expectations now on everyone so that we all can come back to a space of a peaceful and happy family who enjoy spending time with each other, or at the very least, just like, it's like neutral. Can we just be neutral? So these two things have come about from that flippant joke that hurt my feelings, which could have gone in so many different ways. It could have ended up in a really big steaming argument. It could have ended up with me just saying, well, you can just leave, see you later. instead of having like a bit more of a pragmatic conversation around the heart of what that comment meant to him, to me, and to our relationship. Because you have to remember, in a relationship, there are like 3 different entities. There is each person plus the relationship itself. And all of those things need to be nurtured individually and together in order for a relationship to feel satisfying, fulfilling, safe, and worth putting in the effort for. You have heard from this that, I did react. I am struggling with parenting. I am, really, really in the human trenches of dealing with the ever-changing dynamics of families and relationships. And I am just sharing my recent experience in case it resonates with anybody out there. But I would love you to, think about your own relationship in this lens of, has my relationship become something habitual that we are just in because that's what we agreed to however many years ago when we got together or when we made our vows? And we are sort of existing and just holding on and just sort of playing out the same day over and over, like Groundhog Day? Or are we actively choosing to A, be here, and B, nourish and nurture our relationship as an entity of its own outside of the family and outside of ourselves individually, so that it can flourish as well as the family flourishing and as well as yourself flourishing? I don't know if we will always choose each other, but I've been around long enough and I've had a divorce already, and I know that realistically speaking, people do grow apart. So I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. But what I do know is this relationship with this man is definitely something that we both choose to communicate, to reflect upon, to choose again and again and again. And we both choose to take care of each other and each other's needs as much as we can, and with the resources that we have at the time. And without knowing how the future pans out, I feel like that is pretty much as much as you can ask for in a relationship. Knowing that when I speak and when I say how I feel and when I ask for what I need, he will listen and he will try, and vice versa. And that, I believe, is a good relationship. And then we know that we are both here actively choosing our relationship on purpose, mindfully choosing to be here and to nourish this relationship. We are not here out of inertia. We are not here out of habit, but we have these check-ins that allow us to take stock and choose each other and the relationship over and over again. And that might sound really, really tedious to you, but I feel like it's the best way to, I think, inhibit the stagnant, habitual patterns that can form in relationships where you really do take your eye off how you want to be, who you want to be, and what kind of relationship you want to have. So I want to leave you with just a couple of questions today. Are you in any relationships, whether it is your romantic relationships, your platonic relationships, your family, because you are actively choosing them and actively choosing to nourish them, or have some of those relationships become habitual? And if they have, then can you inject some mindfulness into those relationships, or are they ready to, are you ready to let them go a little bit because they no longer serve you or they no longer feel good? And the second question that I have around that is, where in your life are you actively, mindfully choosing to put your energy, or where are you just habitually existing? Because this happens not just in relationships, but also in careers, in other habits, in styles, in thinking patterns. All of those things can become habits if you don't give them the time to reflect and to question, and ultimately to make the choices to live a life that feels really good to live. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode of Big Stuff as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Now, if you did enjoy this episode, it would really help me if you wanted to share it with just one person that you think is going to get something out of it. And also feel free to drop a comment. All of these things really help podcasts to gain more ears, and that's what we're really here for. Also, be sure to subscribe, then you will never miss an episode. If you want to find out more about me, who I am, what I do, then you can go and check me out at daniellecolley.com.au. I'll see you next episode for more big stuff.